Good morning. It is Sunday, August 23rd. We are in our last week of our Loving Like Jesus series. It has been a couple of weeks since our last lesson. So just going to do some quick catch up and review. Uh, a couple weeks ago, we looked at a popular story in John chapter 4 and the woman at the well. And we talked about how we need to love others by just sitting and being with them. And then the week before, in the first week, we talked about how God has, given us a name. And we looked at this story in John chapter 1 about Simon Peter's first interaction with Jesus and how God feels the same way about us. And if you haven't seen either of those videos, they are available on the East Point Youth Ministry YouTube page. They're also available on the East Point Youth Ministry Facebook page. This week in particular is our last week, but I think it's my favorite of the weeks of this series when I was doing the planning for this, because we're going to be talking about something very important and talking about standing up for others. I don't know if you've ever had a time in your life when someone was picking on you or making fun of you, and you were in a situation where you couldn't defend yourself. And if someone came over and defended you, how did that make you feel? Because today is going to be all about standing up for others when they are in situations where they can't defend themselves. There is a book series and a movie series titled Harry Potter. Is it my absolute favorite? Not really. In fact, spoiler alert, I've seen all the movies and I've read like 3 chapters of the first book. But in this series, in Harry Potter, there's a moment in at least the movies. I'm certain that the book, it's probably the same. But in the 5th movie, it is called The Order of the Phoenix. And if you haven't seen it, there are going to be spoilers, so I apologize. But toward the end of the movie, and I believe in the book, Voldemort, who is the main villain of the series, is getting ready to face off against Harry Potter. Harry is just 15 years old, not much experience with magic, unlike Voldemort, who is older and more experienced and gaining more power. So Dumbledore, who is the headmaster of Hogwarts and Harry's mentor, shows up at this moment because Harry is going to struggle battling Voldemort and most likely be killed. And so Dumbledore shows up to help defend Harry from getting killed. And he shows up because, well, one, he loves Harry and he knows that by standing up for Harry, he's going to protect him. And it reminded me of this because in the story we're going to look at here in John chapter 8, Jesus does the exact same thing for someone else. Now, a couple weeks ago, we looked at the woman at the well. Now, in John chapter 8, and starting in verse 1 and reading down to verse 11, we are going to be talking about the woman that was caught in adultery. But Jesus does the exact same thing for this woman. He stands up for her. He protects her, because no one else is going to do it. This is a story we know all that, that we know pretty well. But John chapter 8, starting in verse 1, it says, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." This is a story we know. This is a story we've heard. This is an incredible story, though, for us to learn on the topic of defending other people. And I think there are three things that we can take away from this story to, I think, help us learn to love others by standing up for them. And the first point is this: don't judge a person for where they are. You think about before this story, this woman had been caught having sex with a man that wasn't her husband. And this is obviously a very wrong thing to do. But the Pharisees and the teachers are trying to trap Jesus into doing something that isn't a part of his mission. It isn't a part of his ministry. It isn't part of the reason why he was there. You know, Jesus's ministry and mission was to seek and save the lost, people who were considered outcasts. And in this moment, the religious leaders know that the law says that when a woman is caught in adultery, she should be stoned to death. These leaders want to trick Jesus into saying something that they can use against him. And he's basically put in a lose-lose situation. If he allows them to stone the woman, he's going to violate everything that he's been teaching about love and forgiveness. And if he stops them from stoning the woman, he will be violating the Jewish law. So what does Jesus do in this situation? Well, the first thing, he ignores the angry mob, the crowd. But what he doesn't do is judge the woman for her actions. And I think that's big for us because we aren't called to assume something about someone else because of their mistakes. We all live in the same sinful world, and we're all going to do things that are wrong at times. It's been a part of our life ever since Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3. Was it wrong that this woman slept with another man? Absolutely. And we should think that it's wrong. But we should never go to the extreme that the religious leaders went. Just because they messed up does not give you the right to talk down to someone or to hate on someone. Because if as Christians we do that, then how can we expect them to come and to know Jesus? You know, you point in the Bible where you read that the more hate a person receives from Christ followers, the more they're inclined to follow Christ. You know, obviously you're not going to find it, and we can't be that example. We are called to love others for who they are, even when they make mistakes. And guess what? People are going to make mistakes, but guess what? So are you. If someone is messing with another person for their mistakes, then you should defend the person's dignity because that's what Christ does for us. Because the next point is this: stand up for people who make mistakes. I remember one of the times, I was a sophomore in high school, and I remember I was talking to my youth minister, and I had brought up about this girl who was in my class. I didn't know her all that well, but she became pregnant. And I don't know what led to that situation. I don't think it was just something I went in and talked to him about. But somehow we got on that conversation. And I remember just, not necessarily joking around about it, but not necessarily being all that serious. I think I had the religious leader's mindset that this woman did something wrong. Her friends no longer want to be with her. You kind of get what you get, is sort of my reaction. But then I had talked about one of my friends, who was a girl who was in like the circle of friends I was a part of, actually went and befriended her, which you don't see a whole lot of. I mean, everyone else was looking at her differently, but she was trying to love on this girl and help her out. And I remember telling my youth minister that, and I could tell that he was disappointed, mainly in my, how I was going about this situation and this conversation with him. But I remember him saying, like, that's what it means to be the church, what your friend did. And I remember it stung, even though I don't think he meant it in a hurtful way. But I walked out realizing the mistake I had made. That I should have also been that person to show love to her rather than judge her. And so I remember walking out wishing I had done it differently, and not necessarily to gratify myself, but just wishing that you know how I was handling the situation wasn't great. But him saying, well, that's what it means to be the church, is so poignant for me, and I think that's why I enjoyed this story as much as I do, because it's very challenging. And yes, I can go on to say that I did get to know this girl, that she has a, I believe 16, 17-year-old son now, which is crazy. Some of you might actually go to school with this guy, but I'm not going to release the name. But we stand up for those who make mistakes. That's what we're called to do. We stand up for those who get made fun of for, a disease or a condition that they're born with, we stand up for people that nobody else wants to be around. That's what Jesus is modeling for us with this woman here in John 8 who commits adultery. Jesus doesn't stone us when we make mistakes. He doesn't look down on us when we slip up and, we either look at porn or, we talk back to our parents, or when we lie, or when, just name any sin that you can think of. Jesus doesn't do that. That's not a part of who he is or who he's ever going to be. Now, are there consequences for our actions, for our slip-ups, for our mess-ups? Of course there are. I don't want you to think that I'm saying that there's not. Sometimes the consequences are detrimental. Like what we see in the Old Testament with the flood, knocking out all of God's creation other than Noah, his family, and two of every animal. But that was humanity's consequence, because every single person other than Noah and his family refused God. They didn't try to get better. They honestly didn't care. They wanted to continue to live their life of sin. And even when we sin, Jesus still loves us, and Jesus still wants us to believe in him. God has always wanted that for his creation, but he's always wanted his creation to survive for the purpose that he created us for. You look in the Bible, when people go to war, usually it's because a region or a country has turned against God. At this moment, the people who want to trap Jesus here in John chapter 8 are against him. They're not for him. They're not for helping this woman. And he makes them swallow their words when he tells them that whoever hasn't committed a sin can throw the first stone. And since they're all humans, they've all sinned, nobody can throw a stone. Jesus is the only one who hasn't sinned. And he stands up for the woman when no one else is going to do it. So who is that person that you need to stand up for? Who is someone this week that you might be thinking who might be alone or hurting that you could be there for? I want you to think about that for a moment. Because my third and last point as I close is we only need to love others, not hate them. If you look at verse 10 here in this story here in John 8, Jesus asks where everybody went and if any of them condemned her, and she responds by saying no. And this next part is my favorite part of the story, because he responds by telling her that he doesn't condemn her either and to go and sin no more. But I love how Jesus asks where the people went, because in just the verse earlier, he's still in the middle of the crowd. So he has to know that there are people leaving. It's not like he went and grabbed some lunch and then came back 3 hours later to find that all the people are missing. It says clearly that he's still in the middle of the crowd as the people are leaving one by one. And I think that Jesus may have wanted the woman to see that he actually had her back, that he was with her all along, to show her that even though she had messed up, he's still in control and is always going to stand up for her. When other people in our lives mess up or they get thrown under their bus by others, we can be the ones to stand up and to say that you can only do that if you have ever sinned. We get to stand up for others and say, hey, while you're knocking this person down and hating on them, I'm still going to choose to love them even through their imperfections. Jesus loved this woman through everything and forgave her for what she did. And he does the same for every single one of us. He's never hated anyone. Yes, he's been disgusted and he's been angry with people, which is very obvious, especially in the Old Testament. But he's never failed to love everyone. And we have the incredible ability and the incredible gift to shine God's love on others and stand up for them when nobody else will do it. So will you take that challenge to stand up for others? See ya.